Welcome to Friday Q&A for another week. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. If you've got questions for next week, get them in. I will be away next weekend, so I'll try and get Friday's video shot at some point during the week. Ah, look at this. We've got a big fat cat coming in. Hey, you want to join us? Say hi to all your fans, mate. The real reason people watch. Big fat cat. Lots of people. Hey, should we do some questions? You want to do that? He's gone. If you want to see the lick of the week for this week, go to the Facebook group. There is a link in the video description, and please feel free to contribute your own licks of the week. I'm always keen to pick up new ideas. Until then, I'm going to let the cat out, and then I'm going to answer some questions. Rock operas and concept albums. When I found out about this concept that people could, tell a story while also recording an album full of music in my teens, again, when I was basically just getting into music, I found it really, really fascinating, and I love storytelling and I love riffs, so it seems like the perfect thing. Operation Mindcrime by Queensryche, obviously that's kind of the benchmark, I think, for like 80s concept albums anyway. And listening to that, I was kind of like, man, I just love this concept. Like, surely there were other bands doing stuff like this. And that led me to, not discover, but I found out about Streets by Sabotage, and I was already aware of Sabotage. I liked a bunch of their songs, like the Hall of the Mountain King album, the Edge of Thorns album, and somehow I totally skipped over Streets. And getting that album was like one of my favorite bands, and then one of my favorite formats, and that is my favorite concept album. I like it even more than Mindcrime. The way it sort of just takes off. There's a song on there called Tonight He Grins Again, and it's, listening to it just gives me chills, and the album really kind of launches off from there. And you got songs like Ghosts in the Ruins, which is just, again, fantastic, and Chris Oliva's guitar playing on there. Again, it's a really special album to me, listening to the way that's all put together. And they had little conceptual songs and suites on other albums, and that is a drop dead classic. That is one album every rock and metal fan should own. I think it's a really beautiful thing, and obviously it's no surprise that they went on to do Trans-Siberian Orchestra, who I also love, and their Christmas themed albums, which is on paper sounds super lame, but when you listen to them and get into them, it's beautiful stuff. So yeah, obviously Mindcrime, Streets, they're right at the top of the list. That is the thing that got me into prog rock as well, like enjoying concept albums, and then kind of going on the internet, looking up what else is a concept album, getting into Rush, obviously 2112, and then the little suites they would have, like Hemispheres, and what's the other one, Cygnus X on A Farewell to Kings. So obviously Rush, and then Yes, like Close to the Edge. You can argue whether it's a concept album or not, but that particular song I think is phenomenal. And Tales from Topographic Oceans, which is bonkers. I'm not too into Rick Wakeman's solo albums that he did, like The Six Wives of Henry VIII. I listened to that once, and way too corny for me. But obviously Tommy, I really like by The Who, but I think I prefer Quadrophenia, and the movie as well. That is some of Pete's best work. There's a couple of songs on there. Again, I think the thing about concept albums, because as humans we love storytelling, and we love stories that, you get a 3-minute song and you kind of get a little story in there, but if you're able to stretch that out over a whole album, you can really, really pack an emotional punch. So yeah, there's a couple of others. There is is it Fate's Warning? Do they have a concept album? Or am I thinking of, no, it's not Fate's Warning, it's the other band. They're kind of in that genre. You got Fate's Warning, you got your Queensryche, you got your Dream Theater. Scenes from a Memory, that's one of the first albums I bought, actually. Didn't even realize that it was a concept album until later. Love that. Oh, Crimson Glory, that's it. Transcendence, that's really good. I had to listen to that recently, and that's a really, really cool one. I think it's just interesting, that whole era, how it's easy to look back on it and just see it as this whole like monoculture of guys with big hair and Ibanez guitars, or Jackson guitars, or Charvel guitars, whatever people were playing at the time, when really people were doing some super interesting stuff. Even like Judas Priest, Nostradamus, I think is really cool. And then Mastodon are a modern band that I love, who do concept-based stuff that I think is pretty amazing. Stuff, obviously, like, what one has Oblivion on it? Crack the Sky. That's my favorite modern metal album ever. So yeah, I'm a pretty big fan of the whole concept album thing. And if you listen to Back to Zero, the last Ragdoll album we did, it's not a concept album, but there's a lot of recurring themes, and there's a couple of songs which I'll let you figure out which ones kind of tie together a sort of little narrative. So that's a kind of fun way to go back and listen to that album if you're interested. Marvel or DC, I'll put a little disclaimer and say I'm not a huge like comic book movie guy. I think probably my favorite two are both Marvel movies, Black Panther, which I only got around to seeing recently and I really liked, and the first X-Men movie that came out ages ago. I saw a few of the DC movies and they don't quite hit the spot for me, so I think I'm probably a Marvel guy just by default. I'm sure there's a lot of you out there as well. It just, you know, someone made the comparison recently that Marvel's like Fender, where they're just like consistently pretty good, and then DC's like Gibson, like they just should be amazing, and they just kind of keep missing the spot. And you have your fanatical loyalists who really, really like it, and but most of the time it's sort of a little bit off the mark. But yeah, like I said, kind of by default, I'm probably a Marvel guy, although, you know, I'd much rather just watch a nature documentary or watch Seinfeld. Yeah. Haven't tried a Mesa Triple Crown yet. It is something I'm working on. There's a few amps. I think the TC, the PRS Mark Tremonti amp is another one I really want to try. The Mesa JP2C is one I want to get in and demo. Obviously, like a real Friedman amp. I don't know anybody who actually owns one in Perth, though. So, yeah, that's high on the list. The TC seems like the kind of head for somebody like me, where what it does really appeals to the player within, but you know, I don't really need to own another head at the moment. But if anyone out there has one, I'll be more than happy to get it in here and pull some tones from it, because it looks like a sick amp. Tim from MT was asking me about Godin guitars and had I ever tried one, and well, he had one in the shop when he was asking this, so I took it for a little spin. This is a Godin LG model. Look at that tobacco burst, it's real nice. Couple of cool things with it. It's just been refretted and new nut and all that kind of stuff, so it's playing real nice at the moment. But as you can see, Seymour Duncan P90s, super cool the way they set the bridge in. So it's essentially, it's kind of like a hybrid between like a Tele and a Les Paul Jr., which I like. There's a recessed kind of, what do you call this? Where the neck joins the body. That thing, whatever that's called. And it's looking like mahogany on the neck and the body, I think, and sort of Stratty Tele kind of thing with the three-way switch and the two volume controls, but the two pickups. So yeah, it's pretty sweet actually, and I like this as well, the block at the back. So it's kind of a different take. I guess you got like the PRS stuff to me is like Fender cross Gibson, where it's definitely got an aesthetic thing from Gibson, but more so with the Fender style playability and stuff like that. Whereas this almost kind of looks a bit more like a Gibson, but it's got more of like a Fender spec with the bolt-on neck and a couple of other things, and obviously single coils. But yeah, it's kind of like a nice alternate universe Tele Les Paul Jr. So let's hear it. Just as a reference, this is my Hamer, what do they call this, a special. So it's essentially a one-to-one Les Paul Jr. copy, although it does have a super slim neck. And it's also got Seymour Duncan P90s in it, but way more of the traditional Gibson style layout, as you can see. I've got locking tuners on there and yeah, 5 strings. So just to give you a counterpoint to the Godin thing, this one's sort of darker and thicker and has less of that like Fender style attack. Let's have a listen to it. Are they stock frets on my YJM Strat? Yeah, they are. I've just had that guitar set up by Tim at MT Guitars, and he said it was a real pain in the ass to actually, you know, level the frets on that guitar and get it right. But yeah, they're just the stock frets. I really like jumbo frets on Strats, and adding the scallop, however you want to say it, it just makes it crazy good to bend on that guitar. Which practice amp would I recommend buying? Honestly, I think the easiest practice amp to get and probably the most consistently like decent sounding that I've tried is the Boss Katana. You can go and check out my Katana demo, which a lot of people liked, a few people complained about because of the way I set it up, and I am going to address that at a later point and get another one in and demo it. But they're kind of one of those amps where if you just need something to plug into and pull a tone quickly, it's kind of hard to get a bad sound out of them. I really like the old Roland Cube series as well back in the day, but I think the Katana's more voiced for what guitar players, what most of us actually kind of want to use, and you know, just plug in, pull a sound, be happy. Otherwise, you know, if you can't make a lot of noise, just get some plugins. Like if you're a super metal guy, get the Fortin like Nameless, and if you're more a rock player, get something like Mercurial's Spark plugin. I wouldn't really bother with stuff like Bias. I'm not a super huge Bias fan. Even watching, I know Ola England did a demo with the new updated Bias this week, and I watched it and I was still a little bit like, you know, not for me. I just like a solid amp tone, and you know, something like Reaxis or Spark or Nameless really does that in a plugin, and the Katanas sound pretty good as well if you want an actual physical speaker and a guitar amp. Hair metal bands that aren't Dokken or Rat that I enjoy. There's obviously a lot from that era that I really do enjoy, and there's a lot of great riffs that I really like. One thing that I think is pretty interesting, that going back and listening to some of this stuff that I found, is obviously I love the guitar playing in so much of that era and some of the guitar solos, and there's some really iconic players, but I think the thing that I really like are just the big hooks, like, and most of the time it's, you know, somebody playing over these chords in, like, well, I'm in E flat at the moment, but you know, like E, C, D, that kind of thing, and just writing a monster chorus over it, you know, sitting there going or whatever it is. And you know, because of that, I think that's one thing that ties that whole era together, whether you're listening to Judas Priest or whether you're listening to, like, you know, Metallica. I mean, you know, Master of Puppets has that thing where it's going basically E to C as well, which just sounds pretty epic, I think. That particular chord progression, Iron Maiden as well, or, you know, Cinderella, Rat, Dokken, all that kind of stuff. One of my favorite bands from that era, though, is Winger. And Red Beach's guitar playing, obviously, but, you know, Kip Winger's really phenomenal singer and songwriter and arranger. Particularly the song Rainbow in the Rose. That's like almost like a prog metal song. That's a really amazing thing. You know, that lick at the start is one of my favorite guitar things, not just from the 80s, but ever. And then the chords that he's playing, you've got this kind of like static thing happening that where the bass is moving underneath it. I should probably turn my guitar on and play it. And yeah, the solo in that song and all that kind of stuff is really great, but the thing that turns me on about it is the sort of musicality. You know, it is a really well put together song. So, big fan of Winger. There's obviously loads of riffs. Everybody always thinks of 17, which isn't my favorite Winger song. I really like their Pull album from the early 90s, probably more than their 80s stuff. But yeah, In the Heart of the Young, which came out in 1990, I think. That's another amazing album. Rainbow in the Rose, definitely check that one out. And in terms of, like I was saying, because it's like, you know, there are some really great riffs and great players from that era. I think 90% of the ones that I love, though, all come from Whitesnake's 1987 album. And you can debate whether that's like a real hair metal album or not, because obviously Coverdale had a pretty long and illustrious career up to that point. But to me, the guitar playing on it is just so ballsy and so indicative of what I love about that era. John Sykes just has this massive swagger to his playing, you know, whether it's like Bad Boys or whether it's Still the Night, you know, a total Zeppelin ripoff, but who cares when it's such a good riff. And, you know, just rip and pinch harmonics out of everywhere on that album. Give Me All Your Love's another good one. So yeah, there's a lot of my favorite riffs basically come from the 1987 album. So John Sykes, and then Blue Murder as well. You know, like Billy has a really great riff in there, which is, you know, he's using the same tricks he's using on a lot of 1987, but it's just kind of got that like swagger to it. You know, he's doing a lot of double picking stuff, and if I can remember that riff. Yeah, that was probably the worst version of that you'll hear on YouTube today, at least. But yeah, I really, really like that. Another band who I wasn't into when I was a teenager, but when I saw them live, they absolutely blew me away, were Kix. Easily one of the best live bands I've ever seen. Everything about it was just spot on. They were like the glam metal AC/DC to me. Midnight Dynamite, amazing riff. That could almost be an 80s AC/DC song. Or whatever the rest of it goes like. But yeah, that instantly made me a fan of Kix, and they've got some really good songs. And they kind of had that hard classic rock edge in there. They weren't just a pop band with guitars, which is my big criticism of a lot of so-called hair metal. Is it's not really metal, it's not even really rock, it's just pop music with, you know, Floyd Rose guitars and terrible chorus guitars on it. But Kix, Whitesnake, who else did I mention in there? Winger. Man, Winger, yes. Amazing band. And especially that Whitesnake 1987 record, Blue Murder as well. There's a bunch of bands I'm probably missing, but they're the ones that made the biggest impact on me, and sort of as a writer. And you know, obviously Rat and Dokken are huge ones in there. Even like the Scorpions, a lot of their stuff from the 80s. I know they're not technically a hair metal band. I guess as well, like bands like Accept as well, and Judas Priest, a lot of their stuff, it's definitely not hair metal, it's 80s metal, and that's kind of where I lean towards. Dio as well. So I would say that for me, the harder edged hair metal bands like Rat and Dokken, and then the classic 80s metal like Priest and Accept and the Scorpions, sort of really, that you can find like my center of gravity somewhere in there, and then, you know, chuck in some Winger and some ballads like that. And then I liked a lot of stuff that kind of came after the whole Guns N' Roses thing. Like suddenly guys, you know, they started playing Les Pauls and Marshalls again, and you know, kind of writing raunchy stuff again, rather than, like I said, just pop music with guitars. And one record from that era that I really, really like is, it's got John Corabi on vocals and Bruce Billet from Racer X. It's called The Scream. And it's not really a hair metal album, it's just a really good rock album from that era. I was listening to that earlier in the week. Man, I've rambled on. Oh, I have to say as well, probably my favorite riff from the whole era, and it's not even like a sort of raunchy riff, so I'm just totally undoing this. It's almost like a, it's basically like an R&B funk part, is Ladies Night in Buffalo, Steve Vai playing with David Lee Roth. And yeah, something about that song, just, it's still got the swagger that I like about that era, even though it's not like really a hair metal song. That and however the chorus goes, something like that. But Eat 'Em and Smile, that whole record is an absolute bona fide classic. And obviously Van Halen, you know, the stuff they did with DLR, the stuff they did with Sammy as well, probably doesn't really belong in the hair metal category, but they had big hair, and Eddie's the OG of that whole style of playing, so I think it belongs in there. Guitars with custom art and custom finishes. I own Hamer Chaparral, which I've shown you guys in a few videos. If you go and check out my George Lynch inspired preset for the Axe FX3, I pull it out and play it there. But that wasn't painted for me. That was, I think Ormsby Guitars did that guitar for a guy in Perth, and he sold it to a shop and I bought it from the shop, so I didn't even realize Perry had done that guitar until we got chatting a little while later. And yeah, it turns out that was like a custom job that he did. Honestly, for me, I'm not a huge guy with like custom finishes on guitars. Like, my favorite guitar is my PRS SC245, and it's just plain black. And if I had a signature guitar, it will probably be that color as well, with just like a few little details, like, you know, the natural binding, or might have a matte finish or something. I'm more into guitars just kind of looking functional rather than looking super pretty. But my buddy Troy Nababan would totally disagree with me, because he's got some awesome guitars that he's refinished, you know, with like sparkly glitter, and he's got a really cool comic book telly. I'll have to, next time I'm down at the studio, take some photos of that one and post it, because a bunch of you guys would really dig that. These two questions kind of relate. So one is discuss proper legato technique, which is a little bit out of the scope for this particular video. I will do some lessons on it at some point, and post little snippets up for you guys. But honestly, if you want to learn how to do legato technique, go and watch Tom Quayle's videos, go and watch Rick Graham's videos, and just do all of those exercises, because, and also Sean Lane's Power Licks lesson, or anything by Alan Holdsworth, because those guys can play that stuff and they've kind of made a career out of it, and they understand the ins and outs of it so much better than I do. I'm just a guy who likes to play fast, and, you know, if I do some hammer-ons and pull-offs here and there, then yeah, so be it. But yeah, I would really just, especially Rick. Rick's a really great teacher. I like his tones. I like his whole approach to playing guitar. Same as Tom Quayle as well. He's more in the sort of like, I know they do a lot of fusion stuff, but I've seen a lot more just straight-up rock stuff by Rick. So yeah, go and watch those guys. And if you do hit a wall with your playing, this is the other part of the question. A few things that I found when I was a lot younger and probably a lot more dedicated to just practicing. Honestly, just consistency is a big thing for me. Like, playing the same stuff at the same time of day, every single day for the same amount of time, and not having any distractions really, really helped me. So that's part one of it, is consistency and sticking to a practice routine. And the other part is learning how not to care, and kind of how not to give a shit. And playing live really taught me that when you're sitting in your bedroom and you're agonizing over, you know, the perfect legato run or something, kind of doesn't matter unless you can play it when your guitar's hanging around your knees, you're really, really thirsty, and the singer didn't go and get you like a cup of water like you asked them, and, you know, the DJs said, and now the band's on, and you just kind of got to go and do the gig. Or, you know, you've flown to a new city, gone in at midnight, like slept for a few hours, got up, driven somewhere, gone to a venue, not eaten, not had anything to drink, done your sound check, and then the lights come up and you're playing. It's like, what are you going to do? Like, worry about the perfect technique, or just do something that works? So that's the other thing that I've really found, is like having that. And I'm obviously very fortunate where, you know, I'm in a position where I'm playing live a lot and I've got a lot of time to practice, but I find there's sort of like a feedback loop there where, you know, going and doing stuff live and having to really worry about that economy of what's going to work, what can I actually do, and then going back and refining those ideas rather than trying the most insane thing ever and trying to replicate it on stage. That takes a while. So part of it is sometimes you have to push through and you just have to keep banging your head against the wall until it breaks down. Other times you got to disengage and just try something different. Like, you know, you're working on a Rick Graham legato run, maybe just go and play an AC/DC song for fun and beat the crap out of your guitar and do it that way.